Welcome to When Gen X Ruled the Multiplex, where I examine the films that influence those of us who are members of Generation X. 1984's Ghostbusters is one of those landmark films of the 80s that everyone has seen, and as far as I can tell, everyone loves, or at least regards with a great deal of fondness. Directed by Ivan Reitman, who'd previously directed the comedies Meatballs and Stripes, Ghostbusters was written by two of the film's stars, original Saturday Night Live mainstay Dan Aykroyd, who'd had some big screen success starring in The Blues Brothers and Trading Places, and Harold Ramis, a writer and performer with the Canadian sketch comedy show SCTV, who had written the scripts for Meatballs and Stripes as well as for the hit comedy Caddyshack, which he also directed. Before his death in 2014, Ramis directed several films post-Ghostbusters, including the comedy classic Groundhog Day, which starred his Ghostbusters co-star, comedy icon Bill Murray. Murray got his start on Saturday Night Live and also starred in Meatballs, Stripes, and Caddyshack. Prior to making Ghostbusters, the filmmakers and stars had all worked with each other, often on multiple projects, and that probably helps explain why this film gels together so well. At the New York Public Library, a librarian played by Alice Drummond shelves books in the stacks. She fails to notice as books float in the air behind her via supernatural means. Card catalog drawers open by themselves and send cards flying everywhere. The librarian screams in terror as she spots something unseen by the viewers. The film's theme song, Ghostbusters, plays over the opening credits and will be played at several other points throughout the film. In the summer of 1984, it was impossible to escape this song, which hit #1 on the Billboard charts. Ghostbusters was written and performed by Ray Parker Jr., and if you think it sounds a whole lot like the 1983 hit by Huey Lewis and the News, I Want a New Drug, you are correct. The filmmakers specifically told Parker they wanted a song that sounded like I Want a New Drug, and Parker gave them exactly what they asked for. Lewis sued Parker and Columbia Pictures for plagiarism and won an undisclosed settlement. At the Columbia University Department of Psychology, a professor and paranormal investigator named Dr. Peter Venkman, played by Murray, is studying the effects of negative reinforcement on ESP. In other words, he's conducting ESP experiments on a pair of students and giving them electric shocks whenever they get an answer wrong. My sister used to work in the Columbia University Department of Psychology, and she never passes up an opportunity to remind people of the Ghostbusters connection. The students are played by Stephen Tash and Jennifer Runyon. You may recognize Runyon from the mid-80s sitcom Charles in Charge. Venkman, who is charmingly despicable, flirts with the pretty female student while sadistically delivering electric shocks to her frustrated male counterpart. These hijinks are interrupted by the arrival of Venkman's colleague, Dr. Ray Stantz, played by Aykroyd, who is giddy about the appearance of a ghostly apparition at the New York Public Library. Venkman and Ray head to the library, where they meet up with a third colleague, Dr. Egon Spengler, played by Ramis. Venkman, Ray, and Egon head into the stacks and find that the unseen ghost from the opening sequence has trashed the place, leaving goopy ectoplasmic residue all over the card catalog. They encounter a floating apparition of a prim librarian who transforms into a ghastly creature who makes the trio flee in terror. The special effects in Ghostbusters are the work of Richard Edlund, a multiple Oscar winner for his work on the visual effects for the original Star Wars trilogy and for Raiders of the Lost Ark. Back at Columbia, Dean Yeager, played by Jordan Charney, gleefully informs the trio that their grant has been terminated and they are being booted off of campus. Undaunted, Venkman announces a plan to go into business for themselves as the Ghostbusters, a team of paranormal investigators and eliminators. Ray takes out a third mortgage on his home for funding, and they set up headquarters in a rundown fire station. Meanwhile, in a cool Art Deco building on Central Park West, a professional cellist named Dana Barrett returns to her penthouse apartment. Dana is played by Sigourney Weaver, a Yale School of Drama graduate well known for her starring role as Ripley in Ridley Scott's Alien. In the hallway, Dana encounters her socially awkward neighbor, an accountant named Lewis. Aykroyd and Ramis wrote the role of Lewis with comedian John Candy in mind, but when Candy passed on the part, Ramis' old SCTV co-star Rick Moranis, whom we've already seen in Streets of Fire, stepped in and absolutely nailed the part. As Dana unpacks her groceries, raw eggs explode out of their shells and begin frying on her countertop. When Dana investigates a mysterious noise coming from inside her refrigerator, she finds her fridge now serves as a portal to a terrifying supernatural realm, featuring a pyramid-shaped temple surrounded by an ominous swirling sky. A ferocious dog creature with glowing teeth spots Dana and growls the word Zool. The Ghostbusters hire a lackadaisical receptionist named Janine, played by a scene-stealing Annie Potts, whom we have already seen stealing scenes in Pretty in Pink. Dana shows up at the fire station looking for answers about the scary supernatural portal in her refrigerator. Venkman, who is hopelessly horny for Dana, accompanies her back to her apartment and puts on a big macho display to impress her. This does not fill Dana with confidence, who compares Venkman accurately to a game show host. In Dana's kitchen, nothing seems out of the ordinary. Frustrated by Venkman's horndog antics, Dana kicks him out of her apartment. Back at Ghostbusters headquarters, the guys get another assignment, eliminating a ghost who is haunting a posh midtown hotel. Equipped with their untested, nuclear-powered proton packs, which emit radiant streams capable of eliminating ghostly apparitions, the Ghostbusters barge into the hotel and start hunting ghosts, over the objections of the fussy hotel manager, played by Michael Ensign, whom we have seen playing a fussy hotel manager in Pink Floyd The Wall. The Ghostbusters encounter a squat green ghost gorging itself on a neglected room service cart. Such is the popular mythology around this film that you almost certainly know that this creature is named Slimer, even though he is never referred to as such in the film. Much as we all know, the Ghostbusters retrofitted hearse, in which they zoom to sites of paranormal disturbances, is called the Ectomobile, even though, once again, that word is never spoken in the film. Kind of like how we never hear the word Ewok in Return of the Jedi, and yet we all know what these furry little guys are called. I'm not sure Gen X filmgoers got enough credit for just kind of knowing stuff without being able to look it up online. Slimer is loosely modeled upon the late John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd's former SNL castmate and Blues Brothers co-star. When Aykroyd first dreamed up the idea for Ghostbusters, he imagined it as a vehicle for himself and Belushi, with Belushi playing what later became Bill Murray's role. Belushi died while the script was still being written, but a small tribute to him remains in the rotund form of Slimer. After attacking Venkman and covering him in gooey ectoplasm, Slimer heads for a fancy ballroom. The Ghostbusters use their proton packs to blast Slimer. Egon cautions them never to cross their proton streams, as doing so would be potentially cataclysmic. After much chaos and destruction, the Ghostbusters ensnare Slimer in a containment trap. In a montage set to the Ghostbusters theme, we see clips of Venkman, Egon, and Ray becoming world-famous media darlings. The montage includes a cameo from the late broadcasting legend Larry King, and an appearance by a ghostly apparition who gives a sleep-dazed Ray a supernatural missile hickey. They hire a fourth Ghostbuster, Winston Zeddemore, played by Ernie Hudson. A rumor persists that the role was written for Dan Aykroyd's Trading Places co-star, Eddie Murphy. While Ivan Reitman has always denied this, the role of Winston was significantly meatier in the original screenplay. After casting the mostly unknown Hudson, the script was rewritten to make Winston a clear fourth banana to the three high-profile leads. At Lincoln Center, Venkman tries his best to woo Dana. He tells her about his research into the mysterious Zool in her refrigerator. He discovered Zool is an acolyte of a Sumerian deity named Gozer. Dana reluctantly agrees to go on a date with Venkman. A petty and arrogant bureaucrat from the Environmental Protection Agency named Walter Peck shows up at headquarters. Skeptical of all the wild stories in the media about the Ghostbusters, he demands to see the containment facility where they store the captured ghosts to make sure it complies with all environmental regulations. Peck is so loathsome that we are clearly intended to side with the Ghostbusters on this. Seriously though, the Ghostbusters are a bunch of reckless dudes running around Manhattan with unlicensed nuclear reactors on their backs. At the very least, the EPA should take an interest. Peck is played by William Atherton, who would capitalize on the success of this small but very memorable role by playing similarly loathsome characters in a pair of films I've already reviewed here, Real Genius and Die Hard. Venkman refuses to let Peck near the containment unit without a court order. Meanwhile, on the penthouse level of Dana's building, two dog-shaped stone gargoyles break apart, revealing a pair of unearthly dog creatures within. Dana notices glowing light coming from her kitchen. Before she can investigate, one of the dog creatures breaks out of her armchair and drags her into the kitchen, where the other dog creature lies waiting. Down the hall, Dana's neighbor Lewis is throwing a party, where the guests include 80s television mainstay Jean Kasem, widow of the late broadcasting legend Casey Kasem. One of the dog creatures jumps out of Lewis's closet and chases a terrified Lewis down the street. Lewis hightails it through Central Park and gets attacked by the dog creature right outside Tavern on the Green, where the well-heeled dinner guests ignore the commotion right outside the windows. If you squint really, really hard, you still will not be able to tell that one of the dinner guests is played by a very young and pre-famed Debbie Gibson, the teen pop star whose string of 80s hits included Only in My Dreams, Shake Your Love, and Lost in Your Eyes. Venkman arrives at Dana's place for their date. Dana, clearly possessed by the dog creature, identifies herself as Zool the Gatekeeper undercover. She's looking for the Keymaster to open the gate for the arrival of Gozer the Destructor. Dana aggressively tries to seduce Venkman, then levitates above her bed, growling and snarling. A possessed Lewis, who identifies himself as Vince Clortho, the Keymaster, runs around Columbus Circle, searching for the gatekeeper. The NYPD picks him up. Suspecting a paranormal connection, they drop him off at Ghostbusters headquarters. Peck arrives at the fire station, armed with a court order. Above the fervent protests of the Ghostbusters, he shuts down the containment unit, releasing all the captured ghosts back into the city. Peck orders the NYPD to take the Ghostbusters into custody as the ghosts flood Manhattan, causing supernatural mayhem. In a holding cell, the Ghostbusters examine the blueprints to Dana's apartment building, which was designed by a worshipper of Gozer to serve as a doorway to the spirit realm. There's a quick appearance by future Family Matters star Reginald VelJohnson, a few years before his breakout role in Die Hard, as a jail officer who releases the Ghostbusters so they can brief the mayor on the ghostly crisis swamping the city. Lewis the Keymaster joins Dana the Gatekeeper in Dana's destroyed apartment, and then they head up to the penthouse patio to summon Gozer and bring about the end of the world. The Ghostbusters and an argumentative Peck meet with the mayor, played by David Margulies, who was Neil Mink on The Sopranos. The Ghostbusters make a persuasive case that the city is facing a biblical extinction event, and the mayor agrees to let them try to stop it. Ominous dark clouds appear above Dana's building. Massive crowds assemble in Manhattan to cheer on the Ghostbusters, who are escorted through the city by a police motorcade. The Ghostbusters climb to the penthouse level, where they find a possessed and post-coital Dana and Lewis, opening the doorway to the supernatural realm to release Gozer into the world. Gozer appears in the form of a slinky woman with red eyes wearing a bubble-covered bodysuit, and she's played by Yugoslavian model Slavica Jovan, whom we just saw in Body Double. Originally, filmmakers wanted Talking Heads frontman David Byrne to play Gozer, which would have been fabulous. And then they tried to get Grace Jones to play Gozer, which would have been too amazing for words. Gozer orders the Ghostbusters to choose the method of their own destruction. Knowing Gozer can read their thoughts, the Ghostbusters try very hard not to think of anything at all. Except for Ray, who deliberately thinks of the most innocuous thing he can imagine, the mascot for Stay Puft Marshmallows. The Stay Puft Marshmallow Man appears as a Godzilla-sized creature, stomping through the streets of Manhattan on a mission to kill them all. The Ghostbusters try to blast it with their proton packs, which only makes it very, very angry. In desperation, Egon suggests crossing the proton streams, which might reverse the particle flow that allowed Gozer to enter their realm. Aiming at the gateway to Gozer's realm, they fire up their proton packs and cross the streams. The gateway explodes, which blows off the top of Dana's building and incinerates the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, which douses the city in melted marshmallow fluff. On the demolished rooftop, the Ghostbusters free Dana and Lewis from within the charred corpses of the incinerated dog creatures. Venkman, Ray, Egon, Winston, Dana, and Lewis are greeted by cheering crowds as the Ghostbuster theme plays us into the credits. Ghostbusters ended the year as the top-grossing film of 1984, though it would ultimately be outgrossed by Beverly Hills Cop, which opened in December and thus made the bulk of its profits in 1985. Ghostbusters became and remains a cultural phenomenon, and it pointed to a new direction in blockbuster films. Prior to 1984, comedy films were generally regarded as an entirely separate entity from horror films or action films or sci-fi films. Ghostbusters, however, was something different. It was clearly a comedy, it was filled with hilarious jokes, and it starred comedians from SNL and SCTV, but it had a big budget. It was made on an epic scale, it featured a great many complicated visual effects, and it centered around a story that contained fantastical elements. Ghostbusters came out when I was 10, and I had very strong ideas at that time of what a comedy should be. And I was surprised in the theater to find that, while it was a super funny film with a ton of quotable lines, it had the structure and pacing and scope of an action-adventure film. And that soon became the norm. After Ghostbusters, and after the aforementioned Beverly Hills Cop, which was an action film that starred a very famous stand-up comedian, the line between comedies and action films and sci-fi films and horror films began to look less absolute. Is Men in Black comedy or sci-fi? Is Bad Boys action or comedy? What about Rush Hour, or Pirates of the Caribbean, or Guardians of the Galaxy, or Thor Ragnarok? Nowadays, there's no need for a film to be marketed solely as one or the other, and Ghostbusters helped pave that way. The critical and commercial success of Ghostbusters also chipped away at the once firm boundary between TV stars and movie stars. The leads of Ghostbusters all started out in television doing sketch comedy, and while they'd all had some prior success transitioning to film roles, Ghostbusters showed that film studios could cast TV stars as the leads in a big, expensive summer film, and that film could end up being the most successful film of the year. The huge success of Ghostbusters naturally means it became a big and still expanding franchise. A sequel, 1989's Ghostbusters 2, reunited the original cast and creative team with somewhat underwhelming results. There were a pair of popular cartoons, The Real Ghostbusters, which ran from 1986 to 1991, and Extreme Ghostbusters, which aired for one season in 1997. A 2016 reboot, also titled Ghostbusters, featured brief cameos from many of the original cast members as brand new characters. Ghostbusters Afterlife is set to be released later this year. Directed by Jason Reitman, Ivan's son, it's rumored to feature the return of Murray, Aykroyd, Weaver, Hudson, and Potts as their original characters. Odds are probably tilted against recapturing the specific magic in a bottle that was 1984's Ghostbusters, but the phenomenal success of the original means Hollywood will never stop trying. Next time, I'm going to do a deep dive into 1983's Flashdance. Thank you for joining me here today, and I hope to see you back here for that.